Welcome to another Ember Weekend. I'm Jonathan Jackson.
And I'm Chase McCarthy.
And we are once again joined by now recurring guest, Robert Jackson, for another RFC roundup. How are you doing, Rob?
Thank goodness it's not a recursing guest because Jesus, Scrutiny, I don't know what
I don't know how you would. So I'm pretty sure now you've got my wheels turning. We're going to find a way to recurse this. It can be a thing. Hello, welcome to another Ember Weekend. I'm Jonathan Jackson. I'm just kidding.
I feel like it's basically crossing the streams or something from Ghostbusters, right?
Yeah, there's something there. We got a couple, possibly 3 RFCs to go through, so let's dive in. All right, so the first one we want to talk about is something that's a little near and dear to me because of some frustration I had recently in Ember Data model fragment land. So I just had to explain. So I feel like it's not common necessarily to be using model fragments since the adoption of JSON API. So I want to explain what that is. It's basically when you have a JSON, not a JSON API, but like a... Was it just JSON serializer? What was the old one? It's basically like a REST serializer.
Yeah, active model serializer.
Yeah. When you have like an older style API and one of the attributes, which were usually nested one level deep in those APIs, has an object in it that is complex. So it has some fields on it. For instance, a price might have price in cents and a formatted price string. And you always want that to be there. And the attribute that you're going to work with in Ember Data is going to be called total price or something. Well, what Ember Data wants you to do is if you want to embed that in the APIs, it wants you to use the embedded record mixins and use a relationship. So it wants you to call that a belongs to. But that necessitates an ID. Like fundamentally, that is like just a basic assumption of how that works. So what Ember Data model fragments does is it allows you to specify that complex object as a fragment, and it gives you things that a transform couldn't. So a transform, you'd be able to serialize and deserialize to that complex object in the way that would make sense, but things like isDirty and rollback wouldn't work. And the reason there's some pain here is because in order for Ember Data model fragment to do that, it needed to use a lot of private APIs. So we're going to be talking about an RFC that came out right after our hiatus. So we missed it by just a couple weeks. It's called the Ember Data Record Data RFC. That's a mouthful. And it talks about how we can bring those private APIs that make migrating Ember Data model fragments and other APIs and add-ons that utilize these private APIs or intimate APIs. It talks about how to solidify them and really define the interfaces so that there can be more experimentation in this land and we can do things more stably. So, Robert, do you want to walk us through this RFC?
Yeah. So it's been a little while since it came out. I think it's
just a
January.
Few months.
Yeah, January of this year or something.
Not half a year or anything. It was in the lost episodes. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's in the lost archives. That's right. So basically, the idea here with record data is there's some really cool diagrams actually in the RFC that people should totally go look at. But effectively, the interface between the store and like the rest of the infrastructure, like adapters, serializers, etc., and the way it interacts with the actual model is very nebulous. On the diagram, it is like this cloud-looking thing because there's massive numbers of different entry points and the ways that the store and the models end up communicating.
I couldn't figure out what that ASCII art was. I was like, is this
It's like a cloud. Yeah, it's like, I don't even know.
Cloud. It's cloud of ASCII art.
Yeah. It's just really complicated. I think basically it's just I give up making this diagram because there's too many ins and outs. So here's a cloud of all the things. Maybe it's a parrot. I don't know. Anyways, I'm going to say it's a cloud, but now the parrot's looking at me, so I got to scroll down a little bit. So the current thing is replaced by a thing called record data. In the ASCII art, it's still called model data because that was one of the first original names that was given.
Yeah, it's actually funny. The first comment is like, we could probably come up with a better name.
Yeah. As you all know, naming is hard.
Naming is hard, for sure.
Yeah, I also like how in the diagram, there's still a bunch of little X's, like the cloud was just reduced, but it's still like there.
Yeah, there's still like little, yes, confirmed. So I feel like anyways, the point is everything that wants to talk or do things to model instances goes through the record data interface, including the store. So that means we have a very well-defined interface from the store to talk to models, which means that, for example, you can swap out from a DS model base class to a different kind of model class, which is a thing that we're experimenting with at LinkedIn, right? Like there is a Ember M3 effort, and it basically lets us have a single model base class to handle all the API endpoints, right? So the only reason that's even possible is because of the work gone into this RFC in this process. So basically what the goal is, there's a single API. The interface is defined fairly well in this doc. It's in TypeScript style, but it's just like setAttr, getAttr, hasAttr, just methods that you implement on model data that you can use to just talk or mutate or work with the backing data structure. So Ember Data's internals will be working with like ds.model base classes, but you could totally implement a thing that works with your own custom thing or uses plain native classes or doesn't extend from DS model or all sorts of different possibilities. That's the very 10,000 foot overview of what this RFC is about.
I really think this is important for there's companies I worked for where they'd written their own store and model types, but because like most of the Ember developers they were hiring were experienced Ember and Ember Data, they always started looking like Ember Data. They had the same kind of interface to the store, but under the hood they were something different. Like this seems like you could now like migrate over to Ember Data, at least use that for the like outer shell, like the store part of it, the access part of it, and like at least take advantage of some of that, and then slowly get over to like pure Ember Data, like in a piecemeal approach.
Yeah, and I think the migration towards the the record data will fix many of the internal private detail reliances that exist in Ember Data model fragments. For example, as part of doing the work for the RFC and proposing RFC, the Ember Data team actually did spikes of a number of different add-ons that do lots of private API work around Ember Data, and as a result, have many like major version bumps because every time some private API they were relying on breaks, then they have to sort of work around it, fix it, figure it out. And usually that means that you have to look at some table or some grid in the README to figure out which version of this add-on do I need to use with Ember Data. And then consequently, when you go to upgrade like your Ember version and you want to upgrade your Ember Data version and whatnot, you're constantly looking at that grid to see, is my new version there? I guess it's not there yet, so I won't even try. Probably we'll wait for somebody else to try.
You're literally describing like the last 2 weeks of my life.
Yeah,
like that
exactly.
was in a sentence. Yeah. Maybe not 2 weeks.
So I think that in this case, the Ember Data team put together, there is an actual branch, a work in progress branch. We can link it in the show notes, but of actually migrating Ember Data model fragments to use record data and remove massive amounts of the private API monkey patches they have to do to add the functionality, right? I don't think it's 100%. Off the top of my head, I don't think it is, but it's very close, and it makes the surface area much smaller for that sort of like internal detail stuff.
Yeah,
right.
And honestly, I really think that the RFC also, it does a great job of outlining the different responsibilities of Ember Data in a way that because they're trying to define it so well. I think it's Igor who did a lot of the work on this RFC. He wrote it for sure.
Yep, Igor. But I think it also was reviewed by lots of the team, like Chris Overn,
sure.
David Hamilton, like a whole slew of folks. Dan Gebhardt, like the whole Ember Data team basically kind of collaborated and put it together.
Yeah, well, I think that reading this, though, gives you an idea of like what Ember Data is responsible for in a really cool way that I actually think this should be, if you're struggling with Ember Data or if you have Ember Data and you have a big project, this could just help you better understand the intention behind things already. Chase, what do you think Unload Record does with relationships? So say I unload a record and that record is associated with other records.
Probably just nulls out whatever it can. Like anything that when they point to something else, like if they have a belongs to it, they just nulls them out.
I think that, John, it's a trick question, John.
As I'm being a little tricky, yeah. I'm trying to.
The answer is literally no one knows.
No one knows.
Well, probably not
such a good one.
Probably not no one. There's some people that know, but it is extremely hard to reason about. I've included a link in our show notes, but there's an issue that describes just a bulleted list of all the different ways that Unload Record is not tested. Like we don't actually have scenarios in the test suite to cover the various permutations around using create record and relationships and then unloading, or like basically there's no server side component. You just create record directly, or like pushing and then removing. Like the number of permutations that exist that you could imagine being possible, like pushing records in instead of doing adapter fetches, or creating records manually just for client-side records, and then using unload record as a way to do client-side delete, or just all those things. The tests, we just don't have, it's a huge number of permutations we would have to test anyways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is like a huge database problem anyway, like cascading deletes, or whether you just null it.
Yeah, no, this is a hugely complicated. I feel like I need to.
Turns out we have to computer science now.
Yeah, I feel like I need to dial it back and be like, I'm not that was not a shot. It was a trick question because there are so many permutations, and I think so. You said it would null out the relationships. I said that if you unloaded the record, it would remove it from the identity map, but it wouldn't trigger any deletes because there's a destroy record, I believe.
Yeah, function. It's definitely not going to send stuff to the server. I'm pretty sure about that, right?
To me, that's the requirement is I don't want, I'm calling unload a record because I don't want to do anything on the back end. I'm just doing it locally.
Right.
But I'm also only calling unload record on one thing, which means I only expect one thing to get unloaded, no matter how many relationships.
Yeah, but if it's associated elsewhere, you don't want things to be stale and.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of implicitly saying I'm asking you to unload this record, and since there is no mechanism for saying that there's a cascading delete, I'm assuming that it would just.
Right, there's no cascading deletes, but what if that record is part of a has many? Now we have to do a lot of bookkeeping to unload to figure out all the possible relationships.
Oh yeah, but that's your problem. That's not my problem.
Yeah. So this is just one thing. We kind of were talking about a bunch of different things that it's such a complicated space. It really is great to see an RFC like this that tries to isolate it so that we can talk about it. And I think, Robert, you're referring to the I think it was David Hamilton discourse.
Post. So there's a discuss post that talks about details, but specifically there is an Ember Data issue number 5472, that's literally titled "Unload Record is not under as much test coverage as we think it is," and it is a bulleted list of many issues. But yeah, that's a great segue. So David Hamilton put together a post in the forum discuss.emberjs.com. We'll make sure to link it up, that talks about some of the instabilities that have plagued the most recent few Ember Data releases, from 3.2 plus, 3.2 and 3.3, and just sort of try to break down what's going on. Why do we have these issues? We're all software developers. We don't want to ship things that are broken. And frankly, when we ship these versions, all the tests were passing, right? And we increased test coverage. We increased the number of total tests in the system that we're testing in each of these versions, by a non-trivial amount. We're adding tests around the edge cases and the tests around the various permutations as they come up. And then we're finding unspecified behavior that people end up relying on just working a certain way, but doesn't make sense. It's not reasoned behavior. It's just emergent behavior. It emerged from the system as we sort of cobbled it together over time. So then as we come and put some logic to it and say, this should clearly do some other thing. And then we had to test to that effect, and then find out some app now accidentally relied on the timing of observers firing and dirtiness being flagged, for example, right?
I think it can be even simpler than that. Just that sounds ornate. I feel like there's a lot of APIs that are just not public, and people are importing from a literal folder that is included in the Ember Data called -private. Yeah. I've seen it.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So the post is folks should read it. I'm really glad that David put the time to put it together and get it out there. Yep. It is one of those things that none of us want to write, and it's always very uncomfortable / annoying to write and basically say, hey, we've got these mistakes, this is what's going on. As open source maintainers, I can tell you it is really easy to try to say that it's somebody else's fault, and this post doesn't do that, right? It's just a hard problem, and as a community, we just need to come together and sort of figure out what the permutations are, what the cases are. Stop saying things like Ember Data 3. Whatever is broken, and start talking about the actual details of what is broken and what is wrong, and so we can actually fix it, right? Just saying, XY version doesn't work is not helpful at all. It doesn't actually make the problem better. The thing we need to do is test. We need to be testing the betas. If we ever have a hope to getting a release that isn't going to have bugs, it's if people actually test them, right? Yeah. There's so many untested things that the only way they get exercised is in apps, people's apps. So anyways, so the point of the post, I'm rambling now, but the point of the post is we are going to, the Ember Data team is going to be doing a few additional things that we haven't been doing. One of which is testing various open source applications in the versions of Ember Data as we get down to the release. So things like Ember Observer, Travis CI itself, possibly Ghost, apps like that, where they're open source apps and we can test and clone them. I think we're also going to try to do some targeted sort of office hoursy things where like we can sort of like ask me anything and sort of dig into various issues. I think the plan right now is to do that a couple times a week or once a week.
I think I saw Runspired post Tuesday and Friday is what he's going to commit to.
So I think that's going to be really helpful. But again, it all comes down to folks actually taking the time, testing out the betas and figuring it out. And one thing that I don't think very many people know, because I don't know that it's been like widely proclaimed yet, but at the last Ember Data face-to-face, which was after EmberConf in March, the team specifically decided that they wanted to do the LTS process similar to what Ember does. And they decided at the time that they wanted to match the LTS number, like versions with Ember, so that you could know, hey, this thing is stable. As a side note, Ember CLI also do the same thing. So all three of the main projects are going to be LTS in 3.4.
3.4.
Okay. And that is the current beta, right? So if we have any hope of having an LTS that is worth a damn in Ember Data, it is on us to figure out what's going on, test the betas, report bugs, get it going. We can do this.
Yeah, and I, as far as I understand, this RFC that we've been talking about is largely already implemented in 3.4. I'm guessing it's behind a feature flag because I know there's a legacy folder now.
Yeah, so the code base is split, right? So if you look into code base today, like on master, I don't know if it's in the beta branch or just the master branch right now. It'll eventually get to the beta branch, but I don't know which branch it's currently in.
I think it is in the beta branch, but I'm not positive.
The code base, all the previous stuff that was in the private subfolder is now duplicated or replicated for record data. There's a record data version and there's a quote unquote legacy version. The legacy one is still currently what's shipped and enabled by default in like tagged releases, but the record data one is enableable via feature flag on master, essentially. So the idea is, as the APIs diverge in the private API space, we wanted to be able to keep, like, not accidentally break the old thing while we iterate forward on the new thing. And both of the private implementations, the record data one and the sort of prior or current legacy one, run against the same set of tests. So we can ensure that the same expectations that work on both sides, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Since this doesn't mess with any kind of regular user-facing APIs, you should, as long as you're not using anything like fragments, you should be able to switch this on and check your app against it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now, I think you need to throw it to the master branch and then enable the flag, but that should be documented in the Ember Data README. The idea is it's basically akin to just a normal canary feature flag for Ember, right? Like that's the idea. And since Ember Data is just like a normal add-on, it has a little bit of broccoli build foo that swaps the actual implementations out as at build time. So like you're not shipping both of these. It's like it's not bloating your build or anything. It's just we swap out which thing ends up being installed at the private namespace based on what the feature flags were.
Yeah, so that brings me to my last question on this area, and that's the LTS. Is the intention to have the LTS be the Record Data RFC with the feature flag as an opt-out, or is the LTS going to extend and give a longer period of time, a longer on-ramp for the Record Data feature?
So the goal so far in Ember, and certainly we're doing the same thing in CLI, the goal for the LTS is always to provide the most stability, the most stable APIs that we can. And the only way to do that is to not have a massive fundamental shift in the LTS release. Record data is good. It's awesome. I'm very excited. I think lots of people are excited about it and want to use it, but it's a big shift, right? It is not the thing you do just before you're releasing a final stable version that you as a maintainer want to support for 60 weeks for security patches, right? Like it's not that kind of thing. So what I think the TLDR is 3.4 will release with the APIs that we've known and love /hate sometimes to date, and it'll be what we're used to. And our hope is most apps will be able to get to 3.4, and in 3.5, 3.6, whenever as soon as we can enable the record data flag in like a 3.5 or something, still should be stable. Like, obviously, we're not planning to break anything. Our tests are going to be passing. Hopefully, we're going to make sure the open source apps that we used also pass, all that stuff. But it's almost guaranteed to be more buggy, right? Like, it's new code, right? It's new APIs. There's going to be interactions we didn't plan for or didn't think about. Nobody's perfect, right? So that should land in 3.5 or 3.6. And folks that either don't need that the record data implementation, like maybe you're not using model fragments, maybe you're just using the barely scratching the surface of the normal public APIs for Ember Data, and you're like risk averse and you don't you're just worried about the churn of upgrading. Staying on the LTS, that's the point of it, right? There's no like if you're happy with what you've got, 3.4 is going to be stable. We're going to backport any critical bug fixes to it, and there's no reason not to use it, right? It also gives a really nice launching pad for like upgrades in the future. You know for sure that nothing was deprecated in like 3.2 and then removed in 3.4. Deprecated in one version and like one or two versions later removed, which is a thing that has happened, especially for private APIs. The promise here is that if we deprecate a thing, the deprecation must live through at least one LTS and before it can be removed. So if you're comfortable with 3.4 and you don't have any problems with 3.4, you can just wait to the next LTS, like 3.8, and just go to 3.8, and you'll be fine. And you don't have to go from 3.4 to 3.5 to 3.6 to 7 and then 8, right? You don't have to do all these little hops, which is basically what you had to do previously, because you're basically guaranteed a known path from the LTS to the next LTS. Cool.
So that's kind of at odds with the idea that you kind of want applications to test against the beta versions to help with bugs or bug reporting. So I think we had talked about this a little bit offline, but you can set up Ember Try on your applications, I think, to automatically test your Ember Data versions. Is that correct?
Yeah, totally. So you can do it. And this is a thing that we talked about at a recent core team meeting. And I think that we're going to try to do by default in the default app blueprint.
Right.
Where we have a try config in the app, and instead of not specifically about Ember Data, but basically you want to check beta, which is the entire set of dependencies that come with the Ember CLI beta cycle. That's going to be Ember itself. It's going to be Ember CLI itself. It's going to be Ember Data, and possibly other like maybe Ember CLI Babel or HTML bars or like whatever the subset of the next blueprint, like new app blueprint is. Like you want to test that. That is quote unquote testing beta, right? So we're working to with the advent of Ember CLI update, it becomes really easy to do like those package.json style dev dependencies and dependencies merging. There's a really awesome package that Corey Forsyth wrote that is like three-way merger, which is basically just taking the package.json of your current Ember CLI version and the target one and like all of your changes and just figures out the steps that need to happen and merges it. And I think so far it has gotten it 100% right every time I've tried it. And I'm super excited about using it for making apps easier to test the whole set of the beta.
Awesome. That's the real sweet spot though, right? So people have the stability of an LTS, but especially Ember ecosystem developers have some additional applications that will be tested. So they can report bugs on this testing version, specifically like Ember Data, I think is a great example. Like if you just test it on release and it blows up, you can literally just say, hey, this is my error. I'm going to silence it for now until the next LTS. And that's like most of the time, that's better than what we have now. So that seems like a pretty big win.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think I'm hopeful to get it landed in the LTS of like the current beta branch. It's a little bit of work, and it may end up being in Ember CLI 3.5 default blueprint. It mostly depends on how much reworking needs to happen. We certainly don't want to do a large refactor just before releasing an LTS. That same on the CLI side, the same sort of thing, right? But hopefully it can land. I think it should be able to.
Chase, do you want to add anything to that?
All right, yeah, that all sounds good. Just keep in mind, none of this stuff really is going to affect you much if you're just a general user and you're not doing anything weird with Ember Data.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. Definitely check out the RFC. We're going to link to the RFC and to the thing from David Hamilton, the Discuss piece. as well as the hilarious comment about Unload Record, because I thought that was funny. And we will discuss more in the future. But if you have any questions about this RFC, reach out to us on Twitter. Hey, Rob, so really appreciate you being on the show. As always, this is always a super fun experience. And we got some feedback when we did the previous RFC roundup, that we definitely wanted to have you on as a more regular guest. It's great to have some Emberland vibes happen in the Ember Weekend space. So I guess I just wanted to talk to you about like what the future of that will look like. And I think you expressed some interest about the naming. You want to walk us through that?
Yeah. So this sounds good. Folks that know me, they will know that I can talk about almost anything for a near infinite amount of time. So yeah. So it sounds great. I think it would be good to not focus it only on RFCs, because then I can't rant about things that I just feel like ranting about. Like we had a nice little side rant about people testing betas. I think that was good, but isn't like really related to an RFC. So I'll have to come up with another name for this segment. But
you did have a proposal.
Yes. So the Rwjblues roundup.
There you go. All right. So it sells the alliteration. That's all I care about.
We have to get like cowboy hats and cowboy boots. Maybe Chase can help us with that. He's down in Texas. But like, I feel like I got to be like Woody in Toy Story, basically, right? Like,
can we call it the Rwjblues?
Yes. We should do that. We should do it. I love it.
All right. Yeah. Because then we can just talk about anything. You just rant about like clicky keyboards or just anything you want.
I like clicky keyboards.
Yeah. So for now, I guess what that kind of means for you, the listener, is that if you want to have questions, it's probably like Chase and I have kind of talked about this, and it'll probably be an every other episode kind of thing for the Rwjblues roundup or RFC roundup, depending on if there's RFCs that we want to talk about. If you want to ask some questions that lead a little bit, we will be watching our Twitter for information. So I don't know if we have a hashtag yet sorted out, but if you want to just tag it for RFC or Rwjblues or whatever, we will incorporate them into our notes and try to work through as many as we can. Although we had, as we mentioned at the start of the episode, we had a bunch more RFCs to go through, and we only got through one. So we'll get to it if we can. Obviously, we love you, so we'll do our best. But yeah, I think that the best way is just to get some interaction. Reach out to us on Twitter if you have some questions or things you want to talk about. That's probably the best way to do it. And I think that's it for the episode. So once again, Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Jonathan Jackson.
And I'm Chase McCarthy.
And we'll see you next time.